hello. I'm just getting everything all set up. The thumbnail is a nice picture of Apollo. And if you think of it, look on it carefully, you can see that how closely it resembles Jesus, the Greek depictions of Jesus. I suppose I might as well just spread this around to all the different people who may or may not care about it. Okay, let's get this show on the road. As usual, I like to allow a few minutes for people to start coming in. Just letting people have a little bit of time to come in. So just kind of like to this kind of mode, the Phrygian mode, the Greeks used to express the sun, the feeling of a hot sun. Okay, I think we're all ready to get started. I see a few people in here. When we, if you want me to respond to an answer or to a question that you're asking. I'm looking around for my phone because I had it here. It's way over there. Then just at me on Discord. I'll try to periodically read the YouTube chats, but if you want an answer on what we're talking about right at that moment, it's best to at me in the classroom channel of the altar, so that I can respond quickly enough to so that it's still on topic. Just before we begin, I'd like to kind of recap what we've gone over already. So we started with the ancient mysteries and secret societies, which have influenced modern Masonic symbolism. This book was written from a Masonic context. Manly P. Hall's interest was primarily Freemasonic, but he was not actually a Mason at this time. He wrote not long after this, I believe, the Lost Keys of Freemasonry. Something that he was also not yet a Mason, and did not become a Mason until he was in his 50s. Masonry is not it's not just a fraternity, it is a philosophy, or a way of living your life. And my grandfather influenced me with the Freemasonic philosophy from a very young age. The mystery schools of the ancient world are the ancestors of the Freemasons today. So mostly it's Christian theological scholars and Freemasons who are most interested in what we're discussing, the ancient mystery schools. I'm also myself a Rosicrucian, and that is descended from these mystery schools of Egypt. These three, we made each one of these chapters is a video, and these we covered all the major Greek philosophers. We covered the Gnostics and the Druids and all kinds of ancient secret societies that may come up again in more detail, but great overview, just that. Atlantis and the Gods of Antiquity is a lot about the concept of a war that happened a long time ago between gods, or you could say that God, singular, sunk Atlantis. That it's about that mythology. Then the life and teachings of Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, I've heard some people say. That's the teachings of the thrice great Hermes, who is the basis for most occult philosophies that you find in the world today. Even people who consider themselves to be Wiccan, or something, or a pagan of that variety, are usually influenced by Hermetic teachings in ways that they don't even realize. That early Wiccans like James Gardner were influenced by the Hermetic order of the Golden Dawn, and so learning about Hermes is very important. Then we talked about the initiation of the pyramid, which is a fantastic subject of why one should be initiated and what the process of initiation was like in those days, why the pyramid was built. And the pyramid was built, in the view of this book and in my view as well, for the purpose of being an initiatory temple, where people were led. And the reason why there's an empty sarcophagus in the pyramid is that the initiate would lie down in that sarcophagus and be ritually resurrected to life. They would go through a symbolic death and resurrection. Isis, the Virgin of the World. We were discussing the Virgin, Mary, and the story of Isis. They're very similar. The cult of Isis was brought into the Catholic Church. And now we come to the Sun, a universal deity. I used for the thumbnail of this video a picture of Apollo, and I would just like to bring it up here for you. Because if you one look at this picture, and you will tell you a lot about this chapter, teach you a lot. So here we go. Look at this picture here. This is a picture, a fresco of Apollo. But do we notice some similar symbolism here to things that we're quite familiar with? This, as is plain for all to see, bears great resemblance to the Greek the Greek ways of portraying Jesus Christ. We see the solar disk, as one sees also in Eastern Orthodox iconography, as well as the rays, and there are always 7 rays of divine light. The number 7 being important because there are 7 colors in the rainbow, 7 tones in a musical scale, and so on. 7 is the color of, or is the number of the earthly combined with the spiritual. The spiritual is represented by the number 3, and the earthly is represented by the number 4, and the two coming together at this peak are what make the whole spiritual being. So I just wanted to bring this up so we could talk a little bit about it before we jump into this chapter. Today I'm just kind of taking it a little slow, but we will have an enlightening time. The sun, a universal deity. The adoration of the sun was one of the earliest and most natural forms of religious expression. Complex modern theologies are merely involvements and amplifications of this simple Aboriginal belief. It's a pretty bold statement. Complex modern theologies are merely involvements and amplifications of this simple Aboriginal belief. I wouldn't. That's an evolutionary kind of way to put it, and I appreciate that. But I also think that it's true that our ancestors knew exactly what they were doing in worshiping the sun and the solar orb. The life-giving properties of the sun are the reason why life exists here. The life-giving properties of the sun combined with the life-giving properties of our heaven, or of our earthly mother, the earth mother goddess. So the earth is the womb that is impregnated by the celestial ray. That's the kind of the mystery school, this is ancient, you could say it's the simple Aboriginal belief. But it's true, and we know it today that it's true, that the womb of the earth is impregnated by the ray of the sun. The rays of the sun are what allow life to exist here. So he continues, the primitive mind, recognizing the beneficent power of the solar orb, adored it as the proxy of the supreme deity. Concerning the origin of sun worship, Albert Pike, who is a famous Freemason, he wrote Morals and Dogma. Great book, and I recommend you pick it up if you're interested in Freemasonry. and makes the following concise statement in his Morals and Dogma. To them, Aboriginal peoples, he, the sun, was the innate fire of bodies, the fire of nature, author of life, heat, and ignition. He was to them the efficient cause of all generation, for without him there was no movement, no existence, no form. He was to them immense, indivisible, imperishable, and everywhere present. It was their need of light and of his creative energy that was felt by all men, and nothing was more fearful to them than his absence. His beneficent influences caused his identification with the principle of good, and the Brahma of the Hindu, and Mithras of the Persians, and Atum, Amun, Ptah, and Osiris of the Egyptians, the Bel of the Chaldeans, the Adonai of the Phoenicians, the Adonis and Apollo of the Greeks, became but personifications of the sun, the regenerating principle, image of that fecundity which perpetuates and rejuvenates the world's existence. I'd like to dissect this a little bit. When it says, the sun was the innate fire of bodies, the fire of nature. The fire of bodies is the life heat that we have inside of our bodies. The sun is the heat giver. It is the source of all heat in our solar system. And maybe not all heat. There's maybe some self-generated heat in Jupiter and such, but for the most part, the solar orb is the source of our heat. And when it continues and says, was the efficient cause of generation, for without him there was no movement. It's important to think then on the science of molecules. Without heat, what is heat? Heat is the motion of molecules. So when something is hot, the molecules are moving faster. When something is cold, the molecules are moving slower. And if things are at absolute zero, if there's no light or heat, it's not light, but if there's no heat at all, even the smallest bit of light would give some heat, would give some movement. But if there's total absolute darkness and there's total absolute cold, there's no movement at all. That's absolute zero. And above that, things begin to move as they begin to be heated by light. And the sun is a gigantic, dynamic orb. Astronomy has been a fascination of mine for a long time, and the physical nature of the sun teaches us a lot about God, because when one thinks of the macrocosm and the microcosm, our solar system is a microcosm of a larger system. Just as a human being is a microcosm of the solar system, and the cells in our bodies are the microcosm of the human being, that perception of macro and microcosm goes all the way. So that when we talk about the infinite, ineffable God at the very top of all creation, beyond the sun, beyond the galaxy, beyond the universe, that God is typified or manifested in imagery as our sun. Our sun is not itself God, but it is the teacher of that principle. It is the teacher of the divine principle of the Heavenly Father, because the sun itself is our life giver on the earth. But it was brought to be itself. Our sun was created by the ultimate God, but the sun can be seen as being he's the center of this system. This whole system rotates around the sun. just as all of the universe and all of the universes rotate around God. And it is said that God's light is so bright and his presence is so powerful that it would destroy, it would destroy any human who came near to it. Just like the sun. If you came near to the sun, obviously you would be burnt to a crisp, and then there would be nothing left of you. In order to approach God is to be dissolved by his eternal flame. And that is a spiritual union with God. So, to continue. Among all the nations of antiquity, altars, mounds, and temples were dedicated to the worship of the orb of day. The ruins of these sacred places yet remain, notable among them being the pyramids of Yucatan and Egypt, the snake mounds of the American Indians, the ziggurats of Babylon and Chaldea, the round towers of Ireland, and the massive rings of uncut stone in Britain and Normandy. The Tower of Babel, which, according to the scriptures, was built so that man might reach up to God, was probably an astronomical observatory. There's actually one of these crazy out there things that I've heard from some modern followers of Kabbalah who are Jewish. Aryeh Kaplan, I believe, who's one of my favorite rabbinical writers. God rest his soul. But he said that the Tower of Babel was some kind of space station. So, take that how you will. But all over the world, made astronomical observatories and have followed the motions of the sun and the motions of the stars and the motions of the moon, sun, moon, stars, planets, all of that they've followed very, very closely. And they've done so for very good reasons, because by looking out, one can perceive what is in. By perceiving the macrocosm, one can perceive the microcosm. So they were looking up to learn about themselves. Many early priests and prophets, both pagan and Christian, were versed in astronomy and astrology. Their writings are best understood when read in the light of these ancient sciences. With the growth of man's knowledge of the constitution and periodicity of the heavenly bodies, astronomical principles and terminology were introduced into his religious systems. The tutelary gods were given planetary thrones, the celestial bodies being named after the deities assigned to them. The fixed stars were divided into constellations, and through these constellations wandered the sun and its planets, the latter with their accompanying satellites. So, any point in space is going to, in relation to other points, is going to have its own unique view of the stars. And so, if you were to draw a map of Earth and give it to another civilization across the universe, maybe not across the universe, but let's say across the galaxy. If you were to give it to give a map of Earth to an extraterrestrial from across the galaxy, you would map it based on the stars that surround it. And we even did that on the Voyager plate. We engraved a picture of our sun and different lengths according to the distances to different stars. That's a start, but if you think about it, if we told them what the stars looked like from here, which would be giving them the constellations, basically, the zodiac, by communicating the zodiac to another civilization, we would be communicating not only our physical place within space, but also our ecliptic line, so that they would know in what way our planet orbited around the sun. They could find out all kinds of astronomical data from the symbols of the zodiac. It's so when these ancient humans were creating these figures in the sky based upon the path of the sun and the precession of the equinoxes, which is something we'll get to soon. The zodiac is the next chapter, so I won't talk about it too much here, but it's very important to realize that our ancestors knew a lot more than people give them credit for. They were not dumb people. They were not lesser people than we are today. We might have computers, but us who have not spent our whole lives looking at the sky because we've been staring at computer screens, consequently know a little bit less about the universe. And a little bit more because we read through our computer screens the things that they've seen from telescopes and such. But the ancients tell us things that are of the same variety, that teach us the same overall lessons of our place in the universe. And I think that's the most amazing thing of all, is that these ancient peoples could derive the life lessons that one could learn from a lifetime in astronomy. And they could do that back then as well as we can today. So as people, they were as well off as we are. The solar trinity. Let me just check on the chat because this is the first major break here. Just see if anyone is saying anything. Okay, so as supreme among the celestial bodies visible to the astronomers of antiquity, was assigned to the highest of the gods and became symbolic of the supreme authority of the Creator himself. From a deep philosophic consideration of the powers and principles of the sun has come the concept of the Trinity as it is understood in the world today. The tenet of a triune divinity is not peculiar to Christian or Mosaic theology, but forms a conspicuous part of the dogma of the greatest religions of both ancient and modern times. The Persians, Hindus, Babylonians, and Egyptians had their trinities. And more than them, there are trinities, all over the world. In every instance, these represented the threefold form of one supreme intelligence. In modern Masonry, the deity is symbolized by an equilateral triangle. Its three sides representing the primary manifestations of the Eternal One, who is himself represented as a tiny flame, called by the Hebrews Yod. The letter Yod is basically a small dot. It's also considered to be symbolic of. It's not a dot, but a small line. Just a small line. Because of this, they consider Yod to be symbolic of the phallus and the phallic power, as in the Shiva Lingam of the Hindus. That letter, which is the beginning of the Tetragrammaton, Yod He Wah He, is the beginning of it is Yud because it begins with the generative power and then starts the breathing, which is hey, hey. It's a breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. And that's why it's Yod He Wah He. It's why it's Yahweh. There's ways to say it, but that is one of the deep mysteries of the Tetragrammaton and the Hebrew letter Yod. Jacob Boehme. I don't know how to pronounce those O's with umlauts. The Teutonic mystic calls the Trinity the three witnesses, by means of which the invisible is made known to the visible, tangible universe. The origin of the Trinity is obvious to anyone who will observe the daily manifestations of the sun. This orb, being the symbol of all light, has three distinct phases: rising, midday, and setting. The philosophers therefore divided the life of all things into three distinct parts: growth, maturity, and decay. Between the twilight of dawn and the twilight of evening is the high noon of resplendent glory. God the Father, the creator of the world, is symbolized by the dawn. His color is blue because the sun rising in the morning is veiled in blue mist. God the Son, the illuminating one, to bear witness of his Father before all the worlds, is the celestial globe at noonday, radiant and magnificent, the maned Lion of Judah, the golden-haired Savior of the world. And recall now what we were talking about in a past lecture about Jesus Christ coming at the winter solstice, which is precisely the bottom of the season wheel. If you envision a circle of seasons, you have fall, and then you have the winter solstice, winter, spring equinox, spring, summer solstice to fall equinox. So at the winter solstice, at the very bottom, at the 6 o'clock position, Jesus Christ came to humanity. And now we're on the upswing toward the spring of humanity. The spring of humanity is not fully here, but we are going to be there. The spring equinox is coming. It is coming soon. So that's the great year, the year of the life of our species. We've come up, the spiritual life of our species was at its lowest when Christ came into the world, and now it's on the upswing, and it will come around again. And that is the way, what the Hindus call the Mahayuga cycle. That is the way that it works. During the Kali Yuga, a great Messiah comes, and that's why the Kali Yuga ends. Because otherwise, without the intervention of God, this force that is going up and down would continue down forever. Gravity makes it come down. That's a force of God. Forces this to turn and come the other direction. Now a force of God is necessary to lift it back up. And the uprising comes from a Messiah figure. And the Messiah comes, and then he puts energy into the system again, and it continues in a circle. The circle, it is said by the ancient Greeks that the shape of God is the circle, and his movement is circular. And it's precisely this that is why he's the origin of all life, because if things were to just persist forever, they would decay forever. And entropy would be the way of the universe, which is what many people believe today. And I think that is sad. The materialist believes that entropy will be the end of the universe. Whether the universe will end in fire or ice, who knows? But God has the universe on a cycle and has everything beneath it on cycles. Humans have life cycles. Our cells have life cycles. Solar systems have life cycles. Stars have life cycles. Species have life cycles, societies have life cycles, and all of these life cycles we can learn about by studying the movements of the sun and stars. It's one of the most broadly painted depictions for us, because when we look up at the sky, you could say that God painted you a great fresco, a great ceiling painting that depicted everything that you need to know about the life cycle of human beings. So, God the Father, the creator of the world, is symbolized by the dawn because he's the beginning. God the illuminating one, God the Son, who's sent to bear witness of the Father, he is the globe at noonday, which would be the opposite point of that winter solstice point on this wheel. The God who comes at the winter solstice is also the God of the noonday sun. His glory is the highest. When he came as Jesus Christ, he was lowly. He came as a human and lived in a humble life, in a humble place, in a humble time. All those things were lowly. He was at the bottom of the cycle. But when he comes again, which will be at the noonday of the earth, then will he lift the world by his great radiance. He won't come the second time. He won't come at the summertime the same as he came at the winter solstice. When he comes at the summer solstice, he will come in his full glory as the noonday sun. The maned lion of Judah. He who has ears, let him hear. The next astrological age, the next astrological age of this earth will be Aquarius. The man who carries water will be the outward sign of worship. And the inner sign of worship will be the lion, Leo. The Lion of Judah will be the inner symbol of worship. The outer symbol of worship will be the man who carries water, which has not happened yet, but it will happen. That's the way these things go. God, the Holy Ghost, is the sunset phase, when the orb of day, robed in flaming red, rests for a moment upon the horizon line and then vanishes into the darkness of the night to wandering the lower worlds, and later rise again triumphant from the embrace of darkness. That constant cycle of death and rebirth, the cyclical nature of the day and night, is what taught the early peoples about reincarnation or metempsychosis, rebirth. That all things are reborn after a time. They may sleep, but it is God's will that things live. And as it is God's will that things live, then nothing that he wills to live shall perish from the earth. And that means, perish means to disappear from the earth. Nothing, when we die, we are not going to disappear from the earth. We're just going to change forms into something else. And that'll be an interesting day. It'll be an interesting day. It'll be an interesting thing to see. It's kind of exciting. This also, take account in your own prayers or workings of whatever kind, that facing east and facing west and doing each of these at different times of the sun have different meanings. And take into account where you face when you pray, because you need to face well, you don't need to, but you ought to try your best to align yourself with the energies that are. And the solar energy is manifested clearly to us as the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. And if you pray facing the east, you can pray for new life, new things, new dawnings. If you do that while the sun is rising, then you're praying new dawnings. If you face east while the sun is setting and pray, then you're looking back on the beginning of your life. So that's the time for a prayer of gratitude. You pray in gratitude because you're facing east at the setting sun. The sun is setting, but that's behind you. And in front of you, your whole past is laid out. And you thank God for it. Then, on the other hand, if you face west when the sun is rising, then you are looking upon the world that light is hitting. The light comes up behind you, and you see the world that the light is shining on, illuminating before you. That's a time to pray for great discovery, to pray for discovery, for adventure, for things of that nature, of innovation, of creativity. Then you're taking the position like the Creator. You're standing beside Him looking at creation. That's what happens when you face the west when the sun is rising. And if you face the west when the sun is setting, then you are watching the parting of the parting of the light. And so that is a time for letting things go, praying to let things go, praying to put the past to rest, praying for rest, praying for peace. That is done by looking west at sunset. Then, in terms of pointing north and south, they have their own meanings and so on, but I don't want to get too into that. I'll just say that the north and south, if you face the north and south, you have a certain equality of you look to your right. If you're looking north, then your right hand is pointed toward the rising sun. Your left hand is pointed toward the setting sun. And if you turn to the south, it's the opposite. Your left hand will be toward the rising sun, and your right hand will be toward the setting sun. And because of that, and the different nature of the powers which are done by each hand, the yang and the yin, there's a reason why you would choose to point a certain direction in any prayer or ritual of any kind. So people who want to understand Freemasonry or LDS temple traditions or anything like that, or why Muslims all pray toward Mecca. They pray for a different reason. They all face toward Mecca, but instead of following the sun, it's kind of an interesting thing. Saturn worship, but we'll get into Saturn worship later. This right now is about sun worship. To the Egyptians, the sun was the symbol of immortality, for while it died each night, it rose again with each ensuing dawn. Not only has the sun this diurnal activity, but it also has its annual pilgrimage, during which time it passes successively through the 12 celestial houses of the heavens, remaining in each for 30 days. Although to these it had a third path of travel, which is called the precession of the equinoxes, in which it retrogrades around the zodiac through the 12 signs at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years. And of course, you need 360 degrees. This is what's amazing about the zodiac in our world. We have 365 days in a year. So every year, we on Earth move 1/72nd of a degree around this cycle of this circle of the zodiac. Every year we move 1/72nd. So every 72 years we move 1 degree. And that means 70 times 365, which I believe is 2,160 years. That is the length of a zodiac age. Let's see. The great year. So 72 times 365 is the great year, and it's 26,280. 26,280 years, and each one of these zodiac constellations has 1/12 of the of that length, which is 2,190 years. So I was wrong when I said 2,160. It is 2,190 years. That is the length that each zodiac constellation remains the primary of that age. So Christ came about the year 0. We can nitpick and say he was born 6 BC or whatever, but the year 0 is the year 0 based on astrology, not based on history. People don't understand that, but Christ ushered in the age of Pisces, which is the age we live in today. And soon we'll be ushered in the age of Aquarius, but we still have about 170 years before we will be fully entered into the age of Aquarius. That means that all the events of the next 200 years will be the lead up into a new age that will dawn about 2100 or 2190 AD. Will be, for example, that may be the time when humanity finally achieves faster than light space travel or something of that. There will be a great breakthrough that will shake up all of civilization around 2,190 years after the birth of Christ. So 2190. That is what I say unto you. That tell your children. Tell your children. Have them tell their children. Concerning the annual passage of the sun through the 12 houses of the heavens, Robert Hewitt Brown, 32nd degree, makes the following statement. The sun, as he pursued his way among these living creatures of the zodiac, was said in allegorical language either to assume the nature of or to triumph over the sign he entered. The sun thus became a bull in Taurus, which is why the Egyptians sacrificed Serapis, the bull, by drowning it in the Nile, as we recall from our previous lectures, and was worshipped. The sun thus became a bull in Taurus and was worshipped as such by the Egyptians under the name of Apis. I'm sorry for interjecting the things that he's just about to say. and by the Assyrians as Bel, Baal, or Bull. Baal means Lord. Um, so Baal means Lord and can refer to the sun god slash the same God that one would call Adonai or Yahweh. But it can also refer to other gods because Baal is just a title meaning Lord. So there's a god called Baal Hammon. Baal Hammon is a god to whom child sacrifice was practiced. And it's quite an amazing thing. One would give their firstborn son. And why would they do that? Because God gave his firstborn son to the world. That is it's gross and violent and whatever, but they did it because they saw the reflection of this thing coming. And the form that it took among them was that they would sacrifice their own children, their firstborn son, to God. Sometime later, it came that in Europe, for example, you would send your second son to the church because your first son was to inherit your house, and your second son was to the church. But that's backwards. You give your first begotten to God. That doesn't mean sacrifice children. I'm not saying that sacrifice children. I'm saying that your firstborn son is the one who is consecrated to God. And you see that in the tale of Abraham and Isaac. When Abraham goes up on the mountain to sacrifice Isaac, an angel comes and stops him. And because of this, it is said that Abraham's seed will become like the stars in the sky and the sand in the oceans. His descendants. So what has happened there is that it's a similitude of the Christ story, of the son sacrifice. And that's why the son sacrifice is an important part of the mystery cult of sun worship, because the sun is born in the morning, comes to midday, and its glory over the earth. It knows that it's on its downward path, and Christ took up the cross and walked up the hill. That's the same as the sun going down to the horizon. The sun doesn't want to leave us, but that's how we have day and night. So we're left at night, and then we have the reflected light of the moon to brighten our hearts in that time, in the dark time. And then the lights of the stars. So but the sun god, having been sacrificed at dusk, is reborn at dawn, and so Christ is resurrected. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is resurrected. And as I was showing you the picture of Apollo earlier and the resemblance it has to Jesus Christ, there's an exact similitude, in fact, of imagery, because Christianity is essentially a sun cult, and it worships the sun, God the Son, God the Son, God the Father. It's no mistake that Son with a U and Son with an O are cognates, or are homophones, because they have similar meanings. So the sun became a bull in Taurus and was worshipped as such by the Egyptians under the name of Apis, and by the Assyrians as Bel, Baal, or Bull. In Leo, the sun became a lion slayer, Hercules, and an archer in Sagittarius. In Pisces, the fishes, he was a fish, Dagon, or Vishnu, the fish god of the Philistines and Hindus. Jesus Christ, allow me to show you another picture. I hope that I have it still saved, because I have a picture that shows the mitre of the Pope, and alongside Dagon of Sumeria, and you can see that they are in precise similitude. They are made to be similar, and it's purposeful. It's purposeful that they've done so. The headdress of the Pope. It may take too long for me to do this, so I'm going to not bring up the picture. But if you just search for Pope Mitre Dagon, you'll find this picture of the Pope and the fish god of the Sumerians, Dagon, who was also Enki, who was also Vishnu, who was also Jesus Christ. That's the same person. Pisces, the fish, Jesus Christ, Ichthys, Greek for fish. Ichthys is Jesu Christo Theo Eos Soter. Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior, is an acronym. Ichthys, the word for fish, is an acronym for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. Jesus Christ is Pisces, is Enki, is Dagon, is Vishnu. This is a very important thing for people to realize, that these religions are not worshiping separate beings. They're worshiping the same being in different names. A careful analysis of the religious systems of pagandom uncovers much evidence of the fact that its priests served the solar energy, and that their supreme deity was in every case this divine light personified. Godfrey Higgins, after 30 years of inquiry into the origin of religious beliefs, is of the opinion that all the gods of antiquity resolved themselves into the solar fire, sometimes itself as God, or sometimes an emblem or Shekinah of that higher principle, known by the name of the creative being or God. The solar fire has a lot of importance. The Egyptian priests in many of their ceremonies wore the skins of lions, which were symbols of the solar orb, owing to the fact that the sun is exalted, dignified, and most fortunately placed in the constellation of Leo, which he rules and which was at one time the keystone of the celestial arch. That's old. That's very, very old. Leo as... So the zodiac cycles, if we put that on the zodiac cycles, it would be about 12,000 years ago. About 12,000 years ago, Leo would have been, about 12 or 13,000 years ago, Leo would have been the constellation of the age, that the sun would rise in the spring equinox. So this is a practice of the Egyptians from about 12,000 years ago, which is which is what they estimate the true age of the Sphinx is about 12,000 years, because the Sphinx, they think, was originally a lion, and later the lion's head, after the age of Leo was over, the lion's head was carved down into a pharaoh's head, and that's why it's of such mismatched size. because it was originally a very large lion statue. Because it faces the east and faces the rising sun, it was facing Leo, and it was the emblem of that age, which was lion worship. Um, that's that's what we're going to get into with the zodiac stuff. It's just going to blow your mind. The history is written in the stars. History is written in the stars. Yes, again, Hercules is the solar deity. For as the mighty hunter performed his 12 labors, 12, one for each zodiac house, so the sun, in traversing the 12 houses of the zodiacal band, performs during his pilgrimage 12 essential and benevolent labors for the human race and for nature in general. Hercules, like the Egyptian priests, wore the skin of a lion for a girdle. Samson, the Hebrew hero, as his name implies, is also a solar deity. His fight with the Nubian lion, his battle with the Philistines, who represent the powers of darkness, and his memorable feat of carrying off the gates of Gaza all refer to aspects of solar activity. Many of the ancient peoples had more than one solar deity. In fact, all the gods and goddesses were supposed to partake, in part at least, of the sun's effulgence. And that we can clearly see is true, because when we look out and we see Mars, we call Mars Mars, we call Venus Venus. And they both partake of the solar energy just as much as we do. That's astronomically true, as well as astrologically true. That's a key thing that is often misunderstood in the slander and degradation of astrology. That there are symbolic meanings that one can take from the stars, as well as scientific meanings, and one can take them both together, and they will reflect each other, because truth is truth anywhere you find it. Look closely at anything, and you can find the truth of all things. So let's take a look at some of these pictures. This is the Lion of the Sun from Maurice's Indian Antiquities. The sun rising over the back of the lion, or astrologically in the back of the lion, has always been considered symbolic of power and rulership. A symbol very similar to the one above appears on the flag of Persia, whose people have always been sun worshippers. In the time of Zoroaster, this is very true. They've been sun worshippers for a long time. Kings and emperors have frequently associated their terrestrial power with the celestial power of the solar orb, and have accepted the sun or one of its symbolic beasts or birds as their emblem. Witness the lion of the great Mogul and the eagles of Caesar and Napoleon. Imperial standard of the great Mogul. Sol oriens in dorso leonis. Sol sleeps. Oh, no, so Sol in the east. Oh, yeah, so it's saying, yes, the sun is rising through Leo in the east. And what is the age of Leo? It was about 12,000 years ago. Because, and I can say that was about 12 or 13,000 years ago. It was a 2,190 year long age. So there's some room. But we can know this pretty easily, because the very next age will be Aquarius, and the diametric opposite of Aquarius is Leo. So we're about to enter the opposite of the age that those people were living in. And that's a really interesting thing. They both every pair of constellations of that are diametrically opposed, every pair of constellations has a certain meaning when taken together, because both of them rule the age, but one of them takes the secret side and one of them takes the open side. One of them rules openly while the other rules in secret. And that's why the mystery schools the mystery schools will teach the lion and the sun, but the outer schools, the material schools, will teach of the man who carries water. Because one can see it now already, that by 2190, water will become a scarce thing on the earth, drinking water. And what we take for granted now, we will regret, because there will be a loss of drinking water. And the man who carries water will be blessed, because the man who carries water brings life. So the man who carries water will be one who carries water to those communities which are dying of drought. Drought is our next age will be an age of drought. You can mark my words on that. I know that's true. You can see it happening already. Here we have the solar disk, surrounded on two sides by serpents. The winged solar disk. The wings indicate that it moves through the sky. I mean, we know that, but that's why they are put there. The snakes, the two snakes that become entwined around Asclepius' staff, the two snakes are the two principles, the male and female principle, the two strands that make up the DNA double helix. It's necessary to have the two opposing principles, but at the center is the sun. So like a triangle, there's the two opposing principles and then their center. But as a triangle rotates, the two opposing principles and their center changes. So one can view the Trinity from each of its different angles and compare and contrast. It's a very interesting practice in prayer and meditation. This symbol, which appears over the pylons or gates of many Egyptian palaces and temples, is emblematic of the three persons of the Egyptian Trinity. The wings, the serpents, and the solar orb are the insignia of Amun, Ra, and Osiris. Ra is the Holy Spirit, Amun is the Father, and Osiris is the Son. Because Osiris is the one who's resurrected. Osiris is the sun. Even though Amun and Ra are also solar deities, this is what confuses people. They say, what is this? How could Osiris be a sun god if Amun-Ra is the sun god? But Amun and Ra are sun gods, and Osiris is also, because the sun god is represented by a trinity. It's Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Ra is the Holy Spirit. Amun is the Father, and Osiris is the Son. And then the Trinity begins again, because when you say the Son, we're drawn back to the solar orb, the sun. The golden ornaments used by the priestcraft of the various world religions are again a subtle reference to the solar energy, as are the crowns of kings. In ancient times, crowns had a number of points extending outward like the rays of a sun. But modern conventionalism has, in many cases, either removed the points or else bent them inward, gathered them together, and placed an orb or cross upon the point where they meet. Many of the ancient prophets, philosophers, and dignitaries carried a scepter, the upper end of which bore a representation of the solar globe surrounded by emanating rays. All the kingdoms of earth were but copies of the kingdoms of heaven, and the kingdoms of heaven were best symbolized by the solar kingdom, in which the sun was the supreme ruler, the planets his privy council, and all nature the subjects of his empire. And that is why I say, writ large upon the world, you can just walk outside and look up. Walk outside and look up. And whether it's day or night, wherever you are, walk outside and look up, and you can find all of the mysteries written in the sky. But these things are hard to find all of them on your own, and so we like to write them down and encode them in various symbols to try to give to others an impression of what has been learned before. But it is up to you to go out and look at the sky yourself, and you will figure it out. You will learn about these things. Many deities have been associated with the sun. The Greeks believed that Apollo, Bacchus, Dionysus, Sabazius, Hercules, Jason, Ulysses, Zeus, Uranus, and Vulcan partook of either the visible or invisible attributes of the sun. We can even go down that list. I mean, Apollo is the radiant one who is in heaven, so he is God the Father. Bacchus is the sun, God the Son living on the earth, the one who was torn apart and resurrected. And Bacchus is Dionysus. Sabazius I'm not too familiar with, so I won't speak on. Hercules, as we already said, is a zodiac myth of the hero who traverses the 12 houses, the 12 trials. Every one of you is that hero. You are walking the path of the zodiac, and you have to complete the great year. You're going to spend 26,000 years here, so you might as well get used to it. And more. Who knows? But the Norwegians regarded Balder the Beautiful as a solar deity, and Odin is often connected with the celestial orb, especially because of his one eye. He plucked out the other so that it would give him knowledge. If you think of it like that, Odin is the father, is the All-Father. And Odin, the sun, plucked out his left eye. Most star systems are binary. Most star systems are binary star systems, and there are two stars, and that's a balanced system. But in our system, in order to gain knowledge, the left eye was plucked out, which is Jupiter did not gain the mass to become a star. Jupiter is Zeus, or Thor, or Jesus, 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 Zeus. Jupiter, Yah Pater. The Jupiter had the capability of becoming a star, possibly. It's not even of brown dwarf status, but it's this solar system had a counterpart star that was plucked out, and its information, its essences, its matter was spread among the other planets so that knowledge could be had. because we have only one sun, we have life on Earth. Odin gained knowledge by plucking out his left eye. He gained knowledge by plucking out his left eye and had only one eye left, and that eye is the sun. Odin the All-Father. All thanks unto Odin. All thanks unto the All-Father, Father of all. Among the Egyptians, Osiris, Ra, Anubis, Hermes, and even the mysterious Amun himself had points of resemblance with the solar disk. Even Anubis. But Anubis had an interesting connection because he has the head of a jackal. He's connected with the star Sirius. And the star Sirius rises when it's heliacal rising, when it rises on the horizon at a certain time of day, at dawn, basically. That's the time when the Nile will flood. Thus, Anubis is the harbinger of death, but the giver of life. Anubis is one of those two-bladed gods, like Shiva, the destroyer, who also creates. The flood of the Nile destroys, but then, because of the flooding of the Nile, agriculture was possible in Egypt. Egypt would not exist without the flooding of the Nile. So, Anubis was the god of the flooding of the Nile. Isis was the mother of the sun, as we've talked about last time. The last lecture was on Isis and the Eternal Virgin, and how Mary, the Mother of God, the Virgin Mother, gave birth to Jesus, to Jesus. Isis was the mother of the sun. Mary was the mother of the sun. And even Typhon, the destroyer, was supposed to be a form of solar energy. Because even destruction has purpose. The Egyptian sun myth finally centered around the person of a mysterious deity called Serapis. The two Central American deities, Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl, while often associated with the winds, were also undoubtedly solar gods. In Masonry, the sun has many symbols. One expression of the solar energy is Solomon, whose name Sol-Om-On is the name for the supreme light in 3 different languages. Sol, sun, Om, Om, Sol-Om-On. Hiram Abif, the Hiram of the Chaldees, is the solar deity, and the story of the attack and murder by the ruffians with its solar interpretation will be found in the chapter The Hiramic Legend. This is the central part of Freemasonry. The reenactment of the Hiramic Legend is the Freemasonic initiation of the first 3 degrees in the Blue Lodge. A striking example of the important part which the sun plays in the symbols and rituals of Freemasonry is given by George Oliver, D.D., in his Dictionary of Symbolical Freemasonry as follows. The sun rises in the east, and in the east is the place for the worshipful master. As the sun is the source of all light and warmth, so should the worshipful master enliven and warm the brethren to their work. Among the ancient Egyptians, the sun was the symbol of divine providence. The hierophants of the mysteries were adorned with many insignia emblematic of solar power. The sunbursts of gilt embroidery on the back of the vestments of the Catholic priesthood signify that the priest is also an emissary and representative of Sol Invictus, that is, the unconquered sun, which we're about to get into, it appears. Christianity and the sun. I've gone over this quite a bit so far, but I am excited to continue. Let me just check on the chats real quick. Okay. take a drink of water here and we'll get started. Christianity and the Son. For reasons which they doubtless considered sufficient, those who chronicled the life and acts of Jesus found it advisable to metamorphose him into a solar deity. The historical Jesus was forgotten. Nearly all the salient incidents recorded in the four Gospels have their correlations in the movements, phases, or functions of the heavenly bodies. And this is extremely true. The Bible is an astrological book. If you have a strong knowledge of astronomy and you read the Bible, your eyes will be opened. It is, if you take the Bible as being a plain thing, then you've missed the point of it. You've missed the whole spirit of it. If you take it at its basic word, then you are not listening to what is fully true about it. And that is one of the ways to read the Bible, is to think of the astrological importance of what's being said. And there's almost always some kind of astrological imagery being used related to the zodiac or times of day and things like that. Among other allegories borrowed by Christianity from pagan antiquity, I don't think that they're borrowed. I think that they are incorporated. Among other allegories incorporated by Christianity from pagan antiquity is the story of the beautiful blue-eyed sun god, with his golden hair falling upon his shoulders, robed from head to foot in spotless white, and carrying in his arms the Lamb of God, symbolic of the vernal equinox. Easter is around the vernal equinox. This handsome youth is a composite of Apollo, Osiris, Orpheus, Mithras, and Bacchus, for he has certain characteristics in common with each of these pagan deities. The philosophers of Greece and Egypt divided the life of the sun during the year into 4 parts. Therefore, they symbolized the solar man by 4 different figures. When he was born in the winter solstice, the sun god was symbolized as a dependent infant who in some mysterious manner had managed to escape the powers of darkness, seeking to destroy him while he was still in the cradle of winter. The sun, weak at this season of the year, had no golden rays or locks of hair, but the survival of the light through the darkness of winter was symbolized by one tiny hair which alone adorned the head of the celestial child. As the birth of the sun took place in Capricorn, it was often represented as being suckled by a goat. At the vernal equinox, the sun had grown to be a beautiful youth. His golden hair hung in ringlets on his shoulders, and his light, as Schiller said, extended to all parts of infinity. At the summer solstice, the sun became a strong man, heavily bearded, who in the prime of maturity symbolized the fact that nature at this period of the year is strongest and most fecund. At the autumnal equinox, the sun was pictured as an aged man, shuffling along with bended back and whitened locks into the oblivion of winter darkness. Thus 12 months were assigned to the sun as the length of its life. During this period it circled the 12 signs of the zodiac in a magnificent triumphal march. When fall came, it entered, like Samson, into the house of Delilah, Virgo, where its rays were cut off and it lost its strength. In Masonry, the cruel winter months are symbolized by 3 murderers who sought to destroy the God of light and truth. The coming of the sun was hailed with joy. The time of its departure was viewed as a period to be set aside for sorrow and unhappiness. This glorious, radiant orb of day, the true light which lighteth every man who cometh into the world, the supreme benefactor who raised all things from the dead, who fed the hungry multitudes, who stilled the tempest, who after dying rose again and restored all things to life. This supreme spirit of humanitarianism and philanthropy is known to Christendom as Christ, the Redeemer of worlds, the only begotten of the Father, the Word made flesh, and the hope of glory. The birthday of the sun. The pagans set aside the 25th of December as the birthday of the solar man. That's the winter solstice. The 25th is just an ancient miscalculation. So they say. But maybe it has a mathematical significance. They rejoiced, feasted, gathered in processions, and made offerings in the temples. The darkness of winter was over, and the glorious sun of light was returning to the northern hemisphere. With his last effort, the sun god had torn down the house of the Philistines, the spirits of darkness, and had cleared the way for the new sun, who was born that day from the depths of the earth amidst the symbolic beasts of the lower world. Concerning this season of celebration, an anonymous master of arts of Balliol College, Oxford, in his scholarly treatise, Mankind, Their Origin and Destiny, says, the Romans also had their solar festival and their games of the circus in honor of the birth of the god of day. It took place the 8th day before the calends of January, that is, on December 25th. Servius, in his commentary on verse 720 of the 7th book of the Aeneid, Virgil speaks of the new sun, says that, properly speaking, the sun is some of the fathers. The sun is new on the 8th day of calends. The sun is so new on the 8th of the calends of January, that is December 25th. In the time of Leo I, some of the fathers of the church said that what rendered the festival of Christmas venerable was less the birth of Jesus Christ and the return, and as they expressed it, the new birth of the sun. It was on the same day that the birth of the invincible sun, Natalis Solis Invicti, was celebrated at Rome, as can be seen in the Roman calendars published in the reign of Constantine and of Julian, Hymn of the Sun, page 155. This epithet Invictus is the same as the Persians gave to the same god, whom they worship by the name Mithra, and whom they caused to be born in a grotto, just as he is represented as being born in a stable under the name of Christ by the Christians. Concerning the Catholic Feast of the Assumption and its parallel in astronomy, the same author adds, at the end of 8 months, when the sun god, having increased, traverses the 8th sign, he absorbs the celestial Virgin in his fiery course, and she disappears in the midst of the luminous rays and the glory of her sun. This phenomenon, which takes place every year about the middle of August, gave rise to a festival which still exists, and in which it is supposed that the Mother of Christ, laying aside her earthly life, is associated with the glory of her Son, and is placed at his side in the heavens. The Roman calendar of Columella marks the death or disappearance of Virgo at this period. The sun, he says, passes into Virgo on the 13th day before the calends of September. This is where the Catholics place the Feast of the Assumption, or the reunion of the Virgin to her Son. All of the Catholic feasts are placed according to solar or lunar calendars. Most Jewish holidays are lunar. Most Catholic holidays are solar. It's not wrong, it's just different. They're not wrong, they're just different. They're just two different ways of expressing the same thing. The light of the sun comes to us through the moon as well. In the darkest of days, in the darkest of nights, the sun brings us light through the moon. And so when the Jews venerate by a lunar calendar, they have their reasons, and when someone venerates by a solar calendar, likewise, they have their reasons. So, the Feast of the Assumption, or the reunion of the Virgin and her Son, which takes place on the 13th day before the calends of September, this feast was formerly called the Feast of the Passage of the Virgin, Bosobra. And in the Library of the Fathers, we have an account of the passage of the Blessed Virgin. The ancient Greeks and Romans fixed the Assumption of Astrea, who is also the same Virgin on that day. Let's take a look at this picture. The three suns. From Lily's astrological predictions for 1648, 1649, and 1650. The following description of this phenomenon appears in a letter written by Jeremiah Shakerley in Lancashire, March 4th, 1648. On Monday, the 28th of February last, there arose with the sun two parallel, on either side one. Their distance from him was by estimation about 10 degrees. They continued still of the same distance from the zenith, or height above the horizon, that the sun did. And from the parts averse to the sun there seemed to issue out certain bright rays, not unlike those which the sun sendeth out from behind a cloud, but brighter. The parts of these paralleli, which were toward the sun, were of a mixed color, wherein green and red were most predominant. A little above them was a thin rainbow, scarcely discernible, of a bright color, with the concave toward the sun, and the ends thereof seeming to touch the parallel. Above that, in a clear, diaphanous air, appeared another conspicuous rainbow, beautified with diverse colors. It was as near as I could discern to the zenith. It seemed of something a lesser radius than the other, they being back to back, yet a pretty way between. At or near the apparent time of the full moon they vanished, leaving abundance of terror and amazement in those that saw them. So that's what he's describing as a mirage that's commonly called a sundog, or sundogs. They're dogs of the sun. And dog, of course, is God backwards. But basically what it is Binorum per Eliorum. 1647, 1648. I wonder why they wrote 47 over 48. It must have been a difference between the Julian calendar and the Gregorian, something like that. I don't know. Maybe there's some weird thing going on there. But, here we have the Trinity again, and the expression of the rainbows. These are holy solar events that happen sometimes. This also happened. You would do well to look up the miracle of the sun, also called the miracles at Fatima. Fatima is a city in Portugal where great miracles occurred in the 1910s decade, around the end of World War II. So I want to say 1917, 1918 area. About 100 years ago now, there was a great event like this, where the sun descended on the people, it said. And there were many prophecies given. And if you want to just know about some weird occurrences something like 60,000 witnesses. 60,000 witnesses of this miracle of the sun, in which it is said the sun descended. So who knows? But this Virgin Mother giving birth to the sun god, which Christianity has so faithfully preserved, is a reminder of the inscription concerning her Egyptian prototype, Isis, which appeared on the temple of Sais. The fruit which I have brought forth is the sun. While the Virgin was associated with the moon by the early pagans, there is no doubt that they also understood her position as a constellation in the heavens, for nearly all the peoples of antiquity credit her as being the mother of the sun, and her side, and they realized that although the moon could not occupy that position, the sign of Virgo could and did give birth to the sun out of her side on the 25th day of December. And Buddha was supposedly born from the side of his mother. He just popped out the side, and it was painless for the mother. That same claim has been made of Jesus, and that's why the Virgin remained a virgin. Did give birth to the sun out of her side on the 25th day of December, because there would be no breach of virginity. That's the ancient mystery claim. Albertus Magnus states, "We know that the sign of the celestial Virgin rose over the horizon at the moment at which we fixed the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ." The sign, we do know that, and we do know that why? Because the sign of the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ is Pisces, in one which the Greeks called Ichthys. The Greeks, Pisces, is also a Greek name, but Pisces is Ichthys, the fish. Ichthys is Jesu Christo, Theo Ios Soter. And that is the way that we can know that at the birth of Jesus Christ, Pisces was the sign in the sky. And on the opposite horizon was Virgo, because they're two opposed signs astrologically. Virgo is the opposed sign of Pisces. Thus we have the interlocked twinning of Virgo and Pisces, of the Virgin and Jesus Christ. They're permanently locked together. The Virgin Mother and the God the Son. Among certain of the Arabian and Persian astronomers, the three stars forming the sword belt of Orion were called the Magi, who came to pay homage to the young sun god. The author of Mankind, Their Origin and Destiny, contributes the following additional information. In Cancer, which had risen to the meridian at midnight, is the constellation of the stable and of the ass. The ancients called it Praecipe Jovis. In the north, the stars of the bear are seen, called by the Arabians Martha and Mary, and also the coffin of Lazarus. Thus, the esotericism of paganism was embodied in Christianity, although its keys are lost. The Christian church blindly follows ancient customs, and when asked for reasons, gives superficial and unsatisfactory explanations, either forgetting or ignoring the indisputable fact that each religion is based upon the secret doctrines of its predecessor. I think that they know that. I believe that the Catholic Church knows exactly what it's doing. They know their heritage and what they are. Yeah. I think that the common people don't know. The common Catholic does not know these things. They are not taught these things. But that's because their teaching has to go in a stepwise motion. If you've gotten to this point where you're able to receive these teachings, you're far past the point where you would be needing to go to Sunday school at the Catholic Church. Though Sunday school is fun, and go to Sunday school, but line upon line and precept upon precept is how we are taught. And so each one of us builds gradually. I will check on... Okay. The three suns. The solar orb, like the nature of man, was divided by the ancient sages into three separate bodies. According to the mystics, there are three suns in each solar system, analogous to the three centers of life in each individual constitution. These are called three lights: the spiritual sun, the intellectual or solar sun, solar, like as of the soul, and the material sun, now symbolized in Freemasonry by three candles: the spiritual sun, the intellectual or solar sun, and the material sun. God the Father is the material. God the Son is the intellectual. And the Holy Ghost is the spiritual. The spiritual Son manifests the power of God the Father. See, I actually think that it's the other way. But actually it goes both ways. It's that's one of these things about this symbolism, is that they work backwards and forwards. So when you're doing alchemy, you transmute things by inverting them. And this is this is how we can invert this idea to two. So there's two sides to everything, basically. There's two sides. There's a negative pole and a positive pole to every atom. There's always a negative and a positive pole, and they're always expressed in every system. There's no system that does not have both. It could not exist in equilibrium if it did not have both. So, from the point of view of the positive pole, we say the spiritual sun manifests the power of God the Father because he radiates down. The solar sun radiates the life of God the Son. The light itself. The heat is God the Father. The spiritual sun manifests God the Father, the heat. The solar sun, the light, is God the Son. And the material sun is the vehicle of manifestation for God, the Holy Spirit. And then on the other side, God the Father is the material, because it is the material that gives rise to these bodies. These bodies are built materially. We know that. I mean, inside your mother's body, your body was constructed. You were built in this material plane. God the Father, your origin, lies both in the material and in the spiritual. But God the Father, this is a question of seeing it from the point of view of the grass growing from the ground up, or the sun shining down. So the grass, when the grass is growing, God the Father is the earth. And then the grass grows from God the Father, and it comes into the air. And the air is the sun, God the Son, which is light, the light of intelligence. And then the heat of the sun is the Holy Spirit, the intangible essence that gives life. That's my reflected view. So everything has its mirror. Everything has its mirror. So a lot of times, for example, Leonardo da Vinci would write, just because he was left-handed, he wrote in mirror writing. And so you have to hold up a mirror in order to read his writing the normal way. This is a principle that's been used to hide secrets a lot. A lot of times you are shown the world inside out. You're shown, when you're looking at the mirror, you're not looking at yourself. You're looking at a mirror of yourself. And that's something that that is important for people to realize. That a mirror can never show you you. A mirror cannot do that. A mirror can only show you a mirror image. And so the universe is like a mirror. So these mirrors of philosophy come about. The pagan priests always considered the solar system as a grand man and drew their analogy of these three centers of activity from the three main centers of life in the human body: the brain, the heart, and the generative system. The Transfiguration of Jesus describes three tabernacles, the largest being in the center, the heart, and a smaller one on either side, the brain and the generative system. It is possible that the philosophical hypothesis of the existence of the three suns is based upon a peculiar natural phenomenon which has occurred many times in history. In the 51st year after Christ, three suns were seen at once in the sky, and also in the 66th year. In the 69th year, two suns were seen together. According to William Lilly, between the years 1156 and 1648, 20 similar occurrences were recorded. Recognizing the sun as the supreme benefactor of the material world, Hermeticists believed that there was a spiritual sun which ministered to the needs of the invisible and divine part of nature, human and universal. About this subject, the great Paracelsus wrote, "There is an earthly sun, which is the cause of all heat, and all who are able to see may see the sun, and those who are blind and cannot see him may feel his heat. There is an eternal sun, which is the source of all wisdom, and those whose spiritual senses have awakened to life will see that sun and be conscious of his existence. But those who have not attained spiritual consciousness may yet feel his power by an inner faculty which is called intuition." So you still feel the spiritual heat of God in your life, even if you don't believe in God. But if you open up your spiritual eye, your third eye, the ajna eye, you open yourself to the reality that God exists. And you perceive God as existing. That you perceive that there is a spiritual center through which you gain your sustenance. On earth, when we perceive that our spiritual center is the sun, which gives us sustenance, that's a material. We can view it in the material, we can view it in the intellectual, and we can also view it in the spiritual. It is true spiritually that the heat of the sun we feel spiritually, but until we open our third eye, we can't see that that God is there. So when the rising up principle comes about, these principles are meant to link these concepts through a long chain. And you are rising along this ladder of knowledge by this concept. So you are drawn up from the material. The material is a reflection of the divine. So the material is a mirror image, meaning that it's backwards of the divine image, which is correct. We often confuse the mirror for the reality. When we look around ourselves, we don't realize we're looking at the mirror, not the thing itself. That's the thing to understand. And by doing this, we are raising the Kundalini energy and opening the third eye. So, certain Rosicrucian scholars have given special appellations to these three phases of the sun. The spiritual sun they called Vulcan, the solar and intellectual sun, Christ and Lucifer respectively, and the material sun, the Jewish demiurges, Jehovah. That's what I was saying about God the Father being the material, and God the Son being Christ. And people don't realize Christ and Lucifer are brothers, but Christ and Lucifer are brothers and perhaps even twins. There's a lot to be spoken about there. The spiritual son is the concealed Holy Ghost who cannot be named, and they name it Vulcan. Could be, but I don't know. And in our age, the Holy Ghost is masked, has a mask over its face so that people cannot see that it is working. It is concealed because right now we are in a time of darkness. We are in a dark part of our spiritual solar cycle, so that right now we're in the nighttime of the world, and the world is getting ready to wake up. The dawn is coming soon, but it's still maybe 100 or 200 years away. So, Lucifer here represents the intellectual mind without the illumination of the spiritual mind. Yes, because the intellectual mind without the illumination of the spiritual mind is quite evil, Lucifer. Therefore, it is the false light. The false light is finally overcome and redeemed by the true light of God, called the second Logos, or Christ. The secret processes by which the Luciferian intellect is transmuted into the Christly intellect constitute one of the great secrets of alchemy, which are symbolized by the process of transmuting base metals into gold. In the rare treatise The Secret Symbols of the Rosicrucians, Franz Hartmann defines the sun alchemically as the symbol of wisdom, the center of power, or heart of things. The sun is a center of energy and a storehouse of power. Each living being contains within itself a center of life, which may grow to be a sun. In the heart of the regenerated, the divine power, stimulated by the light of the Logos, grows into a sun which illuminates his mind. In a note, the same author amplifies his description by adding, the terrestrial sun is the image or reflection of the invisible celestial sun. The former is in the realm of spirit, what the latter is in the realm of matter. But the latter receives its power from the former. Yes, this is exactly what I was just saying. The terrestrial sun is the image or reflection of the invisible celestial sun. The terrestrial sun is in the realm of spirit. The celestial sun. So the terrestrial sun is in the realm of spirit, what the celestial sun is in the realm of matter. That is, it is the reduced, the hidden. But the latter receives its power from the former. In the majority of cases, the religions of antiquity agree that the material visible sun was a reflector rather than a source of power. The sun was sometimes represented represented as a shield carried on the arm of the sun god, as for example Frey, the Scandinavian solar deity. This sun reflected the light of the invisible spiritual sun, which was the true source of life, light, and truth. The physical nature of the universe is receptive. It is a realm of effects. The invisible causes of these effects belong to the spiritual world. Hence, the spiritual world is the sphere of causation. The material world is the sphere of effects, while the intellectual or soul world is the sphere of mediation. Thus, Christ, the personified higher intellect and soul nature, is called the mediator, who by virtue of his position and power says, "No man cometh to the Father but by me." When the sun is to the solar system, what the sun is to the solar system, the spirit is to the bodies of man. For his natures, organs, and functions are as planets surrounding the central life or sun and living upon its emanations. The solar man is divided into three parts, which are termed the threefold human spirit of man. All three of these spiritual natures are said to be radiant and transcendent. United, they form the divinity in man. Man's threefold lower nature, consisting of his physical organism, his emotional nature, and his mental faculties, reflects the light of his threefold divinity and bears witness of it in the physical world. Man's three bodies are symbolized by an upright triangle, his threefold spiritual nature by an inverted triangle, because the point faces downward. What we were talking about how you can make it any point that you like on a triangle as the mediator between the other two. But the mediator of the spiritual comes down to earth. The mediator comes to earth. Of the material, the earth raises up the mediator. Thus we have these two triangles, when united in the form of a six-pointed star, were called by the Jews the Star of David, the signet of Solomon, and sometimes the shield of Solomon, and are more commonly known today as the Star of Zion. If you want to know why the Rothschilds, are the reigning family on the earth, it is because the red shield. And what is the red shield? The shield of Solomon, which is a red Star of David. They are the Rothschild, the red shield. And that is why they're billionaires and own the earth today. God lets rule who he wishes. These triangles symbolize the spiritual and material universes linked together in the constitution of the human creature, who partakes of both nature and divinity. Man's nature partakes of the earth, his divine nature of the heavens, his human nature of the mediator. The celestial inhabitants of the sun. The Rosicrucians and the Illuminati, describing the angels, archangels, and other celestial creatures, declared that they resembled small suns, being centers of radiant energy surrounded by streamers of virilic force. From Viril Society, let he who has ears hear. From these outpouring streamers of force is derived the popular belief that angels have wings. Outpouring streamers of force. So yeah, you can see on the sun the giant arches that are made, and then the rays that come out. When I have had some spiritual experiences that some people counsel me not to share, but I feel that I can. I I've beheld an angel before, and it was like seeing an orb of pure light that had wings that were like light streaking off of a lamp. Like if your vision is blurry and you see the light streaks. It was like that, but very clear, and clear in a way that they were feathered, and it was golden light, just golden light of these feathered. It had 7 wings, and that's how I knew it was an angel. And it spoke to me. So that was a crazy thing that has happened to me. So anyway, these wings are corona-like fans of light, by means of which the celestial creatures propel themselves through the subtle essences of the superphysical worlds. True mystics are unanimous in their denial of the theory that the angels and archangels are human in form, as so often pictured. A human figure would be utterly useless in the ethereal substances through which they manifest. Science has long debated the probability of the other planets being inhabited. Objections to the idea are based upon the argument that the creatures with human organisms could not possibly exist in the environments of Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune. This argument fails to take into account nature's universal law of adjustment to environment. The ancients asserted that life originated from the sun, and that everything, when bathed in the light of the solar orb, was capable of absorbing the solar life elements and later radiating them as flora and fauna. One philosophical concept regarded the sun as a parent and the planets as embryos still connected to the solar body by means of ethereal umbilical cords, which served as channels to convey life and nourishment to the planets. Here we see Surya, the regent of the sun. Did we look at that last one? I think we must have. Yeah, the 3 suns. Surya, the regent of the sun, from Moore's Hindu pantheon. Moore describes this figure as follows. The cast is 9 inches in height, representing the glorious god of day holding the attributes of Vishnu, seated on a 7-headed serpent. His car drawn by a 7-headed horse. Driven by the legless Arun, a personification of the dawn or aurora. It's a beautiful thing to look at. And you can see here seated, it's just like the Buddha. The Buddha elevated himself to become one of them. But in truth, he was one of them and came here to teach us. He just forgot for a little while. Some secret orders have taught that the sun was inhabited by a race of creatures with bodies composed of a radiant, spiritual ether, not unlike in its constituency the actual glowing ball of the sun itself. The solar heat had no harmful effect upon them because their organisms were sufficiently refined and sensitized to harmonize with the sun's tremendous vibratory rate. These creatures resemble miniature suns, being a little larger than a dinner plate in size, although some of the more powerful are considerably larger. Their color is the golden white light of the sun, and from them emanate 4 streamers of vril. These streamers are often of great length and are in constant motion. A peculiar palpitation is to be noted throughout the structure of the globe and is communicated in the form of ripples to the emanating streamers. And the greatest and most luminous of these spheres is the Archangel Michael, and the entire order of solar life which resembles him and dwell upon the sun are called by modern Christians the archangels, or the spirits of the light. The sun in alchemical symbology. Gold is the metal of the sun and has been considered by many as crystallized sunlight. When gold is mentioned in alchemical tracts, it may be either the metal itself or the celestial orb, which is the source or spirit of gold. Excuse me. Sulfur, because of its fiery nature, was also associated with the sun. As gold was the symbol of spirit and the base metals represented man's lower nature, certain alchemists were called miners and were pictured with picks and shovels digging into the earth in search of the precious metal. Those finer traits of character buried in the earthiness of materiality and ignorance. I was born in gold mining country, and so this all is just, it hits me so deeply. My grandfather was a gold miner, gold prospector in Trinity County, California. And I was born in Nevada County, California, in Grass Valley, California, where Empire Mine took out what in modern times would be something like $5 billion worth of gold. $5 billion worth of gold. But the men who built those, the men who traveled from all over the world to go to California to seek their fortune, that gold rush image is also a mystery school image of the gold miner, the one who seeks, digging through the worthless, the material earth to find the precious substance that lies within. And you are all gold miners of your own soul. So, right now, you're mining for gold. You just have to put your hard hat on, get your pickaxe out, get to hauling. As gold was the symbol of spirit and the base metals represented man's lower nature, yes. Let's see. The diamond concealed in the heart of the black carbon illustrated the same principle. All life gives us principles. Everything follows the same principles. It's all one divine harmony, and it is in great accord. You just have to learn how to see it. Because it can appear disorderly. It's like jazz music. The ears are not accustomed to hearing such strange harmonies sometimes. And sometimes they'll sound tense or but they can be resolved to be something beautiful. They can all be, they're all just extensions of the same spiritual source. And that's how I learned to play guitar, was by studying the mysteries. Playing guitar is the mysteries. As Miyamoto Musashi wrote in his Gorin no Sho, devote yourself to one thing and follow it till its end, and you will find that all paths meet. All roads lead to Rome. So, gold miner and the guitar player meet at the end of the road and come back to the same place. The Illuminati used a pearl hidden in the shell of an oyster at the bottom of the sea to signify spiritual powers. Thus, the seeker after truth becomes a pearl fisher. He descended into the sea of material illusion in search of understanding, termed by initiates the pearl of great price. Take with you the pearl of great price. Sell all that you have to gain the pearl of great price. When the alchemists stated that every animate and inanimate thing in the universe contained the seeds of gold, they meant that even the grains of sand possessed the spiritual nature, for gold was the spirit of all things. Concerning these seeds of spiritual gold, the following Rosicrucian axiom is significant. A seed is useless and impotent unless it is put in its appropriate matrix. Franz Hartmann comments on this axiom with these illuminating words. A soul cannot develop and progress without an appropriate body, because it is the physical body that furnishes the material for its development. The purpose of alchemy was not to make something out of nothing, but rather to fertilize and nurture the seed which was already present. Its processes did not actually create gold, but rather made the ever-present seed of gold grow and flourish. Everything which exists has a spirit, the seed of divinity within itself, and regeneration is not the process of attempting to place something where it previously had not existed. Regeneration actually means the unfoldment of the omnipresent divinity in man, that this divinity may shine forth as a sun and illumine all with whom it comes in contact. The midnight sun. That's an interesting one. The midnight sun has a connection to Saturn, for people who are interested in that. Apuleius said, when describing his initiation, vide ante, afterlife. At midnight I saw the sun shining with a splendid light. At midnight, which is the winter solstice, the sun came into the world. Jesus Christ was born. December 25th, the winter solstice. At midnight, I saw the sun shining with a splendid light. The midnight sun was also part of the mystery of alchemy. It symbolized the spirit in man shining through the darkness of his human organisms. It also referred to the spiritual sun in the solar system, which the mystic could see as well as midnight as at noon. The material earth being powerless to obstruct the rays of this divine orb. The mysterious lights which illuminated the temples of the Egyptian mysteries during the nocturnal hours were said by some to be reflections of the spiritual sun gathered by the magical powers of the priests. The weird light seen 10 miles below the surface of the earth by I Am the Man in that remarkable Masonic allegory, Etidorpa, Aphrodite spelled backwards. Mirrored, inverted. This has been a thread that's been running through our lecture today. May well refer to the mysterious midnight sun of the ancient rites. Primitive conceptions concerning the warfare between the principles of good and evil were often based upon the alternations of day and night. During the Middle Ages, the practices of black magic were confined to the nocturnal hours, and those who served the spirit of evil were called black magicians, while those who served the spirit of good were called white magicians. Black and white were associated respectively with night and day. And the endless conflict of light and shadow is alluded to many times in the mythology of various peoples. The Zoroastrians is a great place to start with that. The Egyptian demon Typhon was symbolized as part crocodile and part hog, because these animals are gross and earthy in both appearance and temperament. Since the world began, living things have feared the darkness. Those few creatures who use it as a shield for their maneuvers were usually connected with the spirit of evil. Consequently, cats, bats, toads, and owls are associated with witchcraft. In certain parts of Europe, it is still believed that at night black magicians assume the bodies of wolves and roam around destroying. That actually happens in the American Southwest as well. Native Americans sometimes assume the bodies of wolves and terrorize people in New Mexico, Texas, Arizona. There are some interesting stories surrounding that. Skinwalkers. Anyway, from this notion, the stories of the werewolves. From this notion originated the stories of the werewolves. Serpents, because they lived in the earth, were associated with the spirits. As the battle between good and evil centers around the use of the generative forces of nature, winged serpents represent the regeneration of the animal nature of man, or those great ones in whom this regeneration is complete. Among the Egyptians, the sun's rays are often shown ending in human hands. Masons will find a connection between these hands and the well-known paw of the lion, which raises all things to life with its grip. It's one of the handshakes of the Freemasons, called the paw of the lion. So, when it's talking about in Central and South America, Quetzalcoatl, the winged serpent, was Jesus Christ, according to the Book of Mormon. But you don't have to take my word for that. You can just think about what is the allegory of a winged serpent. The allegory of a winged serpent, a serpent lives on the ground, in the ground, burrows in the ground. But a winged serpent is one who once burrowed in the ground and now flies in the air among the light and the rays of the sun, instead of down in a hole of darkness. The serpent that flies, the dragon, the winged serpent, is a symbol of divine wisdom. The Quetzalcoatl being Christ, there's some interesting stuff that will come up later, but because we will go over some Mayan mythologies, but in the Mayan mythologies, Quetzalcoatl was crucified, and there is in the Habsburg Codex, I believe, in the Habsburg Codex, it's you can see Quetzalcoatl crucified and cut into pieces, and that reminds us again of Bacchus, cut into pieces. So they somehow, all these different cultures in the world have the same sacred tradition roots. Why is that? Maybe it's because they have the same spiritual roots in the spiritual world. And when they manifest here, they bring those with them. They bring the knowledge that they have of the truth with them, and it manifests in various ways because we forget a lot, but not all. And so we all only remember partially, but by combining these visions of all the different peoples, we can put the pieces of the puzzle back together and begin to approach the divine again. And by doing that while we're alive, instead of returning to the divine after death, we achieve the resurrection, which is the bringing to life what is dead. The physical matter is dead. The body is the tomb of the soul. These are ideas that have been a constant throughout these lectures. Solar colors. The theory so long held of 3 primary and 4 secondary colors is purely exoteric. For since the earliest periods, it has been known that there are 7 and not 3 primary colors. Though 3 primary and 4 secondary colors is interesting because 3 primary would be the trinity of the spiritual trinity, and 4 secondary would be the 4 elements. Like we were saying earlier about the number 7, the importance of the number 7 is that there are 7 colors, 7 musical notes, and that it is a combination of 3 plus 4, which is the spiritual united with the material. So 7 is the number of the earth. Thus, although green can be made by combining blue and yellow, there is also a true or primary green, which is not a compound. For it has been known that there are 7 and not 3 primary colors, the human eye being capable of estimating only 3 of them. Thus, although green can be made combining blue and yellow, there is also a true or primary green, which is not a compound. This can be proved by breaking up the spectrum with a prism. Helmholtz found that the so-called secondary colors of the spectrum could not be broken up into their supposed primary colors. Thus, the orange of the spectrum, if passed through a second prism, does not break up into red and yellow, but remains orange. And that is because it is orange. And there are 7 primary colors. I think that breaking it down into 3 primary and 4 secondary is not an exoteric thing, but an esoteric thing. The exoteric has taken it, and it is taught. They teach it for esoteric reasons. That's the funny thing about it. Consciousness, intelligence, and force are fittingly symbolized by the colors blue, yellow, and red. Consciousness, blue, like the sky. Intelligence, yellow, like a light, like the candle light or light of the sun. And force, red, like the blood. That's what gives us the force of our bodies. The therapeutic effects of the colors, therefore, moreover, are in harmony with this concept. For blue is a fine, soothing, electrical color. Yellow, a vitalizing and refining color. Red, an agitating and heat-giving color. It has also been demonstrated that minerals and plants affect the human constitution according to their colors. Thus, a yellow flower generally yields a medicine that affects the constitution in a manner similar to yellow light or the musical tone mi. Musical tone mi. Do, re, mi. That's the yellow. An orange flower will influence in a manner similar to orange light, and being one of the so-called secondary colors, corresponds either to the tone re or to the chord of. So this is the chord of do and mi, or the tone re, which is in the middle, because they are 7 separate tones. But there's only, so when you make a chord, there's only 3 primary tones that are used. You use the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th. That's what you use to make the chord. A little bit out of tune, but but all 7 notes exist. So when we talk about 3 primary notes, then we have 4 secondary notes. The different combinations of notes are like the different colors. And many musicians experience synesthesia, what's called synesthesia, which is the experiencing of tones as colors. If you would like to understand music better, listen to music and try to imagine it as colors. Try to imagine the colors. That was one of the things that helped me most as playing guitar. I think it was Stanley Jordan or Stanley Clark, something like that. And he was playing, and he said, "The colors, man, the colors. Can't you see the colors?" The tones and the colors are what really give us the complete thing. The ancients conceived the spirit of man to correspond with the color blue, the mind with yellow, and the body with red. Heaven is therefore blue, earth yellow, and hell, or the underworld, red. The fiery condition of the inferno merely says the nature of the sphere or plane of force of which it is composed. In the Greek mysteries, the irrational sphere was always considered as red, for it represented that condition in which the consciousness is enslaved by the lusts and passions of the lower nature. In India, certain of the gods, usually attributes of Vishnu, are depicted with blue skin to signify their divine and supramundane constitution. According to esoteric philosophy, blue is the true and sacred color of the sun. Interesting. The sky is blue. The apparent orange-yellow shade of this orb is the result of its rays being immersed in the substances of the illusionary world. In the original symbolism of the Christian church, colors were of first importance, and their use was regulated according to carefully prepared rules. Since the Middle Ages, however, the carelessness with which colors have been employed has resulted in the loss of their deeper emblematic meanings. In its primary aspect, white or silver signified life, purity, innocence, joy, and light. Red, the suffering and death of Christ and his saints, and also divine love, blood and warfare or suffering. Blue, the heavenly sphere and the states of godliness and contemplation. Yellow or gold, glory, fruitfulness, and goodness. Green, fecundity, youthfulness, and prosperity. Violet, humility, deep affection and sorrow. Black, death, destruction, and humiliation. In early church art, the colors of robes and ornaments are also revealed whether a saint had been martyred, as well as the character of the work that he had done to deserve canonization. It's interesting that in Egypt, black, I've talked about this last time, last lecture, that black was the color of life in Egypt and white was the color of death, because when you die, you go into the light, which is white, and black was the color of life because it was the color of the dirt of the Nile that gave rise to things. And I think that that's what people have backwards now. People see death as this dark blackness in front of them, but it's this bright light. It's a bright light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, it's bright. It's white. Death is not a bad thing. Black is life. Death is life and life is death. So sometimes that's what I'm saying about mirror teachings. So you see, this is a mirror teaching to this early symbolism in the Christian church, where black is death. They both have their position, because we have two hemispheres of the brain. So we have two mirrors of each other. And the workings of the mind are best described by the workings of mirrors. When one manipulates one's own mind, one must take it into account that they are manipulating something. If they're thinking of something here on the left side of their brain, it is being processed also on the right side of the brain in a different way, in a mirrored way, which means that people often only live on one side. They make their home in the left brain, and their right brain goes without much presence. But that is a dangerous path to go down, because then one doesn't realize that the mirroring effect of things, which is vital to understanding what a human being is. So, this is the last paragraph. In addition to the colors of the spectrum, there are a vast number of vibratory color waves, some too low and others too high to be registered by the human optical apparatus. It is appalling to contemplate man's colossal ignorance concerning these vistas of abstract space. As in the past man explored unknown continents, so in the future, armed with curious implements fashioned for the purpose, he will explore these little-known fastnesses of light, color, sound, and consciousness, which is one of the reasons why people take psychedelics. They want to explore new dimensions of light, color, sound, and consciousness. The solar face, from Montfaucon, Antiquity. The corona of the sun is here shown in the form of a lion's mane. This is a subtle reminder of the fact that at one time the summer solstice took place in the sign of Leo, the celestial lion. Oh, there we go. Now next week we'll cover the zodiac and its signs. That will be a fantastic lesson, because in order to understand the world, one must understand the zodiac. So I look forward to lecturing on it next week. So I'll wait for about 5 minutes to see if anyone has any questions about this lecture that I can answer, and then I'll wrap it up. That's my usual way. Listen for the colors. Sol. This is the chord Sol. The sun. Sol. you guys have a good night, and